finally have our first somewhat fun story out of the Trump administration. I mean, I think we're we're over 2 months in, and it's been really, really difficult to cover almost all of it. But this text signal thing is at least something we can mock.
This is also, and I think it is probably the first time the administration square on is on its heels a little bit. I mean, I definitely think that there has been some panic around Tesla's stock price, and we've seen sort of second order panic from the administration to make sure that Elon Musk's cot or bed or whatever he's sleeping in the White House is still comfy. But this is the first one that feels like we may end up seeing, and it's very reminiscent. People forget this, but starting sometime around now, in the Trump administration, the first one, it was scandal after scandal. You had that guy, the head of the EPA was taking all sorts of, writing off all sorts of flights. I mean, everybody who got into the Trump administration the first time around was basically using it as their own little slush fund. And they were dropping like flies. I don't think that's going to be the case in this administration, not because they're not doing this, but because there's no one in there to find them and catch them doing this. I mean, honestly, I think we have no inspector generals in these offices. We have no, they have cleared out and intimidated so many people already so early on, including going after lawyers to whistleblowers and big law firms and the Washington Post, CNN, ABC, paying off. I mean, time and time again, whether these outlets and individuals have been cowed, it certainly sends a message to everyone that you may not want to stick your neck out a little bit because it's going to get lopped off. But in this instance, and in fact, I would argue that the reporter in this instance did the bare minimum in terms of the opportunity that was afforded them.
Yeah, we sit on Biden's declining mental acuity, or some of the stuff that was in that book, War, the Woodward book. You sit on all of this information for years, but Goldberg couldn't stay in the chat for a little bit longer? Come on, buddy.
Well, we'll get to that. And it's sort of what's sort of fascinating is that there's an inherent contradiction in it. When we heard this story yesterday, we were on air. I think all of our first instinct was it's fake.
Right.
Not fake in terms of it's not real, but more this is a little staged. Jeffrey Goldberg, obviously an uber supporter of Israel and Israeli Zionism. He was a IDF prison guard.
Oof.
Some of us, some are at a beach, work at a restaurant. Others of us go be a guard in the IDF.
Committing war crimes to blow off steam.
And although, that is a general statement, we don't know that he specifically was involved in any war crimes. But, I mean, we do know that it's quite clear members of the IDF prison guards have committed war crimes. We saw a video of it, frankly. But that's aside. That's not the point here. Apparently, what happened, according to Jeffrey Goldberg, is one day he's sitting around and his phone gives him a notification.
This is March 11th was the date.
Yeah. And you've been added to Signal by Matt, what's it? Michael Waltz?
Mike Waltz.
Mike Waltz. Sorry. And, if you have Signal, this happens to you time to time.
Yeah.
Because
they're trying to sell you crypto usually.
People, well, that happens to me on Skype all the time, constantly.
Right.
But on Signal, if one of the people who who you're in their contact with, will come in and they'll sign up, and they won't know that you might want to select which contacts you're in, and they'll just blow it all out, and you'll get this notice I haven't talked to this person in 8 years. And you think, are they adding me to Signal? And then you remember, oh, it's just a blanket thing.
It's an automated thing.
And then a couple of days go by, and all of a sudden he gets this notice that he's been added to a new group, new signal group.
Called a Houthi PC small group, and PC stands for Principal Coordination.
And so he thinks, this has got to be a joke.
Yeah.
He thinks it's either like some type of phishing thing, and supposedly he consults with people in the office, and he's like, "What should I do?" And they're like, "Check it out, see what's going on," because it could also be, and this is the case, and it's understated because so many people don't want this to be a reason that Hillary Clinton lost, but I can tell you that people who work in the government and reporters all know, and you see it reported here and there, and you just don't take it terribly to heart. But foreign countries, I've heard China, I've heard Iran, I've heard Russia, I imagine Israel, although I don't know if I've specifically heard that. They have been going after reporters, journalists, government officials, campaign officials across the political spectrum, trying to get compromising stuff in some fashion or another. And so he was skeptical, and then he gets in this, and the people who are on this include JD, as in JD Vance. That's the vice president. Marr, the Secretary of State, Mark Antonio Rubio. And what happens as this guy's on the chat, and because he joins it immediately, all of these people's seconds say that they're here. So they are all talking about, like, the primaries are saying who are their seconds who are also monitoring this. So, for instance, Rubio writes Mike Needham for state, designating the current counsel of the State Department as his representative. They all have representatives on this. I don't know if that's so it's not on their phone, and they have their body person essentially with them to use their phone, or if it's a way of making sure that they never, like, they have maybe some type of plausible deniability or whatnot. Andy Barker for VP, Tulsi Gabbard is here, Joe Kent for DNI, Scott B. would have been Treasury Secretary Scott Bessant, Pete Hegseth, Brian McCormick for the NSC, representing to John Ratcliffe. All in all, there were 18 individuals, including National Security Council officials, Steve Witkoff, the President Troubled Middle East and Ukraine negotiator, Susie Wiles, the White House Chief of Staff, and someone identified only as SM, who the reporter, Jeffrey Goldberg, God forbid Jonah Goldberg, Jeffrey Goldberg assumed was Stephen Miller. And
it looks like it's likely Stephen Miller, who seems to, according to like the way that he reported this text chain, is basically the point person for Donald Trump. And all of the administration's decisions as it relates to immigration and our foreign policy thus far seem very Stephen Miller.
He massages me every night before I go to bed and gets me down. And then this guy, Jeffrey Goldberg, whose initials are JG. So his initials showed up in this chat too. And apparently no one took the time to go, I guess nobody on this chat is the designated, hey, just make sure that everybody on this chat is everybody that we think it is.
And we should also be clear that using a commercial encrypted app for national security conversations is unheard of. Like,
it's illegal.
It's illegal. There is supposed to be, like, a process by which national security information is communicated. And I was listening to some people talk about who'd previously worked in administrations that, like, if it's a holiday, you've got to go to your computer. You've got to, you can't do it on your phone. You can't do it on your phone and speak with this classified material. You have to go through a very official, encrypted, a government process on your physical computer, and let alone doing it on your phone, via a commercial app you can download from the App Store that, like, you and I have to talk to, say, random other people in an encrypted way.
There's multiple legal issues with this, just on its face. The first being 18 USC paragraph 793F makes it a federal crime for people who are entrusted with information related to national defense. I think it would be hard to argue that planning to bomb a country is not at least associated with national defense. I think we could have a strong argument as to whether it helps our national defense. But certainly these people would say it was a national defense question.
Of course.
Right. Just trying to be fair.
Oh, and apparently there was a CIA officer on the chat who Goldberg didn't identify because the CIA officer is undercover, obviously.
Well, is a active agent.
Active agent or whatever. Like, that name shouldn't be revealed. So the fact that the CIA officer was even included would indicate that it's about national security and national defense.
Well, it goes on to say, for information related to national defense, quote, through gross negligence, permit classified intelligence to be delivered to anyone in violation of that trust. In other words, I don't know how you could characterize doing a chat in a unauthorized, arguably illegal mechanism in which you're having this exchange and not accidentally add a reporter to it who you've never met, incidentally, or never talked to. It's not like these guys are buddies. There's only two explanations for that. And that is a deliberate way of leaking something that they thought was in their benefit, which it's hard not to sometimes, like, go to that, because the second option is a level of gross incompetence and negligence that is borderline unfathomable. I mean,
it's the second one.
I think it is too. And I one of the lessons I always talked about from Air America was people would write us at times, because of the moves that the company would make and say, there's a mole. You must have a Republican mole in your company. And I just remember thinking, like, if I was looking at this from the outside, that would seem the most obvious answer, because no one could really conceive of this level of incompetence.
But the third option goes in hand with the incompetence, which is that they're attempting to avoid scrutiny and having record keeping of their actions.
Well, that's the second illegal thing, is that it became clear to Jeffrey Goldberg that all of these messages were set to erase within 4 weeks.
And that avoids the Presidential and Federal Records Act, which is what they're supposed to be documenting. So it begs the question, if they're doing this with our national security and doing this over an App Store encrypted app, not through official government channels that would be able to keep records of their actions, how many other agencies are circumventing the Presidential and Federal Records Act?
Now, somebody in the IM just said, Hegseth was probably drunk when he set up the group chat, so cut him some slack. It appears as if it was Waltz who set up the group chat, which does not mean that Hegseth wasn't drunk during the entire time.
Good point.
That's what it means to be a mighty man of valor.
You can be drunk and be on a group text. The other thing, so that's just the sort of the legal aspects of this. But let's take a look at some of the exchanges here, because it's fascinating. One, Well, let's go through it and we'll see. Here's J.D. Vance. Oh, no, go back up because I think let's go up a little, or maybe it starts here. Yeah. So J.D. Vance says, Hegseth, if you think we should do this, let's go. I just hate bailing Europe out again. Okay, let's just start there for a second.
Yep.
They are bombing the Houthis because without the Europeans asking them to, because of what Israel is doing.
Yep.
So let's be clear, who it is being bailed out here is not the Europeans. It is Israel.
But earlier in the exchange, and Goldberg doesn't use these as screenshots for some reason, but he quotes Vance, 3% of U.S. trade runs through the Suez, 40% of European trade does. There's a real risk that the public doesn't understand this or why it's necessary. The strongest reason to do this, as POTUS said, to send a message. Meaning they're basically admitting there that they are bombing Yemen because the Houthis have been disrupting trade in the Suez in opposition to Israel's genocide in Gaza because, by the way, it's off their shores. So that's like a tale as old as time that they can do that. But like they're admitting that they're doing it for capitalist reasons, that because they're upset about the disruptions.
Not just that, but I say the opposite. They're doing it to send a message. They're not doing it because they think it's going to change their behavior. It has shown time and time again that the Houthis are not responding to this. It's not even clear to me how much of that disruption is taking place right now. And so this is when, and particularly when the bombing happened. Remember that was during the ceasefire. And so when he says the president's just sending a message, what it sounds like to me is the president just wants to bomb somebody to show that we can. And I think they chose the Houthis because of the dynamic between Israel and Saudi Arabia, both of whom, the Saudis and we were engaged, or at least we were enabling the Saudi bombardment of Yemen for
under Trump,
multiple,
by the way,
and Obama for multiple years.
Yeah,
and so it sounds like this is just a guy who wants to show, this is excuse the metaphor, but a penis measuring project, and so it's just essentially to send a message. So we're not bailing out the Europeans in any way. We're bailing out the Israelis to the extent that anybody's being bailed out here.
But that's Vance's perspective on it when he says, and so that's what's revealing about these messages, right? I just hate bailing out Europe again.
Well, that's what I was suspicious of it because, and I know, I think we believe it more now that more information's come out, but it seems like something he would want to be seen saying about something that's actually about protecting Israel. It's like, the bailing out Europe thing. I don't know. It's flattering to him.
But they say that in public. Yeah. And then he goes on to say, let's just make sure our messaging is tight here. If there are things we can do up front to minimize risk to Saudi oil facilities, we should do it. Yeah. So we get here. And Hegseth goes on to say, I fully share your loathing of European freeloading. It's all caps pathetic.
It's weird to all caps it to your...
I mean, honestly, what, you're in a... Just take a moment.
He must have been a little
disturbing
enthused.
as this is. These are the most powerful people in the world talking about using the most powerful killing machine developed by man.
Like it's fantasy football.
And you've got to all caps something to make your point. Like, it is the tool of people who see themselves as incredibly weak and ineffectual that you need to capitalize things like that. Or, if you do it as a joke, which I could see, but I don't think he's making a joke here. It's pathetic. But Mike is correct. We are the only ones on the planet, on our side of the ledger, the good guys, who can do this. Nobody else even close. Question is timing. I feel like now is as good a time as any, given POTUS directive to reopen shipping lanes. I think we should go, but POTUS still retains 24-hour decision space. Do you know how much a guy like Pete Hegseth likes to write the words decision space? It is like, he is just like, it's total. He is, we got 24 hours of decision space.
I mean,
I am so in on this.
He was cast for this role.
Totally.
Tell that to your significant other. I need an hour of decision space on this one.
Well, no, his significant other doesn't get any decision space.
And then SM.
Stephen Miller, most likely.
No picture. No representative.
Get it.
Also, no representative. Yeah. There was no, as far as we can tell, there was no someone from his office.
Because it seems like he's speaking for Trump.
As I heard it, the president was clear. Green light. But we soon make clear to Egypt and Europe what we expect in return. In other words, okay.
Not Israel.
So Miller, understand the way this is going on. Hegseth is dicking around with J.D. Vance. They're going back and forth. Vance is saying, I sort of don't want to do this. I sort of don't want to do this. And Hegseth is like, well, you know, buddy, whatever, you know, I hate it too, but I think maybe we should, but no. And then Miller comes in. The president was clear. Green light. There's no ambiguity here. But we soon make clear to Egypt and Europe what we expect in return. We also need to figure out how to enforce such a requirement. For example, he says, e.g., if Europe doesn't remunerate, then what? If the U.S. successfully restores freedom of navigation at great cost, there needs to be some further economic gain extracted in return. That's a huge if.
Did Europe give this request to the administration? Because they're acting like they're acting to reopen shipping lanes and that they'll get some extraction from Europe later. But as Matt has been saying, this is for Israel. Israel wants this, attacking the Houthis and the branches of resistance to the genocide is in Israel's interest.
It may very well be an interest of that those European shipping, but this
you
is
have
one
to ask if this is what they want, then sure, but maybe ask that before you demand something in return before taking an action for your proxy state as it commits genocide.
It is an interesting.
Also, who do you ask? The leader of Europe,
right?
Hey, Europe. And then Hegseth is agree. And then scroll down because we got more here. At one point, maybe it's up higher where Vance says, I'm not sure. Prior to him saying this, Vance says, this order might be in contradiction to the president's, the president's got to go before that. The president's policy on Europe. And maybe see if you can find that. Okay, wait. Right there. I think it is. Team, I'm out for the day doing an economic Michigan event in Michigan, but I think we are making a mistake. This is the way that Vance goes on at the beginning of this. 3% of U.S. trade runs through the Seds, 40% trade does. There's a real risk.
Yeah.
Okay. The public doesn't understand this or why it's necessary. The strongest reason to do this, as POTUS said, is to send a message. Then he goes on to say, I am not sure the president is aware how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now. Okay, so in other words, from these guys' perspective, the president wants to make a statement, and that is, we can bomb anybody. And maybe the president is getting a directive outside of these advisors. Or maybe it's one of the advisors on this group chat who is not revealing that they have given the president another reason that they're not expressing in the context of this group chat, which is also very possible. Understand, these people, unlike us at the Majority Report, they don't go and sit at the commissary and eat together every day. They have their own agendas as they go into this. Now, Pete Hegseth is really just basically to tread water and try and make it as long into the day as he can without a scotch.
Because eventually he wants to be on the board of Lockheed Martin and get millions of dollars.
But the other players on this have an agenda, right? Mm-hmm. And so Vance doesn't want to do this because there's a mixed message. We're doing this to protecting the shipping lanes for Europe, but also we're done trying to take care of Europe.
Right.
And so he says, I'm not sure the president is aware how inconsistent this is with his message on Europe right now. So in other words, he's saying, Trump's insane. He's insane. There's no coherence to his policy. It's literally 180 degrees apart, but I'm not going to be that explicit about it.
Also, why can't they just admit it's for Israel then?
Well, this is the thing. I am willing to support the consensus of the team and keep these concerns to myself, but there's a strong argument for delaying this a month, doing the messaging work on why this matters, seeing where the economy is. And that's why Stephen Miller comes in later and says, no, we're doing this. And I suspect there could be a reason that Stephen Miller knows that J.D. Vance doesn't know. And that J.D. Vance, or maybe there's even a third party, someone's not even on this, who is convincing Trump to do this. Netanyahu. I mean, who knows?
But do you remember April 2017? So almost exactly a very similar time frame into his first administration. He dropped the mother of all bombs on Afghanistan. This is Donald Trump's playbook. He wants to have a show of force, even though he pretended to be the peace candidate. This is the hilarity of that claim.
It could very well be that. But Stephen Miller comes in, says it is clear, and which suggests to me that Stephen Miller also wants this. Vance doesn't. Hegseth is willing to do whatever the big dog says, and he looks around at whoever's the big dog. And Stephen Miller comes in and says, we're doing it. It's a green light.
Well, Vance is thinking about being president in 2028, and he's trying to brand himself as the protectionist. And if Trump keeps escalating, this is an issue for him.
But it's quite clear that Stephen Miller is driving this bus, at least, and I don't know who else there is. You've got all the principals on here, and Stephen Miller says it's a green light, and then Hegseth is like, agree.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the director of the CIA is on this chat. These are supposed to be the people most paranoid and diligent about these kinds of things. Can you go up to the emoji fest from Ratcliffe and co?
Incidentally, this is after 53 people have been killed.
Oh, yes. So much fun in the group chat. Excellent. JV is got to be JD Vance, right? John Ratcliffe, a good start. And
you're not really that invested in the group chat when you're just responding with emojis.
Mike Waltz started this group chat.
Right.
Yeah, so punch America, fire.
Now,
Team MAL.
Kowalski from Nebraska on the IM just says, was Israel ever mentioned in this thread? Because if not, that seems oddly suspicious. And I think
Hegseth does mention it at one point. Waiting a few weeks or a month does not fundamentally change the calculus. 2 immediate risks on waiting. This leaks and we look indecisive. 2, Israel takes an action first or Gaza ceasefire falls apart and we don't get to start this on our own terms. We can manage both. But
so understand this was happening during the ceasefire, and so there's a consciousness of Israel, but I do think this has to do with Stephen Miller basically maybe telling the president, "Hey, you got to show that you're willing to drop bombs on people," and that's it. And it doesn't matter how incoherent it is in terms of policy. I'm not sure what else there is to talk about this at this point, but this level of incompetence is astonishing. And the Democrats need to keep this in the news as much as they can. And I just remind you, had it gone to anybody else, this guy knew about the attack on Yemen 2 hours before. He also decided, Jeffrey Goldberg, to leave the chat after the bombing in Yemen started, when he realized this is real.
He really should have milked it for as long as he could have. I can't believe it.
Well, here's the part that is in Congress. And he left out stuff that he deemed to be too sensitive to publish. So if that's your attitude, why are you leaving the chat?
Right.
Like, it's either one or the other. it's either I am an absolutist and I'm going to print everything, and therefore I know I'm in an area where it's inappropriate and I should leave, or I know that I am going to reasonably protect things that are sensitive, and I'm going to stay here because I can get a better sense of the operating, the operations within the administration. And this is going to be, this is a genuinely important news story.
Once in a lifetime chance for a journalist.
But I mean, aside from his personal ambitions, I mean, this is a once in a lifetime chance for the public to get information about just who is actually running this administration. And if there is a cohesive foreign policy, and when you have the vice president of the United States, and it's not like he's kept at arm's length, when you have the vice president of the United States saying, I don't think the president understands how incoherent his policy sounds right now. How on one hand, he's telling Europe, we're not going to be your policeman. You need to pick up the slack here. You need to deal with this. And then on the other hand, we're going to go in and bomb the poorest country in the world for 3% of our shipping.
I agree with you that they should use this story obviously for their political advantage. I'm a little nervous about a reorientation of the Democratic Party's reaction to Donald Trump to once again a national security story. Like, I guess I just never felt, I don't think that Russia, the story had, even though obviously Trump had ties to Russia, it's obvious. I don't know if it had much political salience where they could have been hitting him on, tax cuts for the rich.
But this is a competence question.
No, it's a competence question. I just we've had two stories for the past week where there's been this anti-oligarchy, mass mobilization, people coming out in tens of thousands to hear AOC and Bernie talk. And then now we have this abundance kind of AstroTurf campaign. And now it's okay. This is a layup to return this talking about national security. I think it's a good way to hit them, but I'm concerned that the party's going to take easy outs. That's just my one fear.
I think if the Republicans give you this, you run with it for as long as you can. The Republican Party had a lot of value out of doing Benghazi for years. And Democrats are very bad at this. They're very bad at it. Yeah. They don't know how to do it. But this should be a question of competence. This should be a question of every one of those people should be in front of the Senate right now to discuss how they did not notice. What are the protocols? First of all, what are you doing? How many times have you been on Signal? How much government information has been exchanged on Signal? What other cabinet members are on Signal? What other agencies are using Signal?
What are they trying to hide?
What are you trying to hide by being on Signal?
Yes.
What are the protocols to make sure that your Signal is not accidentally adding a rando to your thing? I mean, honestly, the level of security in a Zoom for a parent-teachers conference. When I get on the Zoom with my kid's teacher to find out what he's been doing in middle school, the level of security is higher than the top of the national security apparatus was in discussing war plans.
Yes. No, I agree. I agree.
We all look around the Zoom and go, is there anybody in this Zoom that we don't know?
Right.
And it's not like there was 500 people in there. There's 18 people. And I feel like there could have been a person whose job it was to say, hey, I'm going to just confirm with this list of people on the PC Houthi attack thread that they're all the same people that we think there is.
No, I think you're right. I think they've got to use it. I'm just flat putting a little pin in it to say this should be a part of the whole attack on the Trump administration and not, the entire focus of, like, say, the MSNBC monologues for the next few weeks. I don't know.
Of course it will be on that. But I mean, it should be a couple of days of keeping these people on their back heels. If they have to, get rid of Wallace, or this creates pressure on senators, I'll tell you, here is Donald Trump answering questions on this. And then we'll take a look at a couple of senators, because they're the ones ultimately that you leverage this against. Because you can't, Trump doesn't care. Nobody in the administration cares. But some of these senators who have been squawking about, national security and blah, blah, they're going to have to justify this. And they should not be able to blow it off in the way they're trying to blow it off. But here's Donald Trump.
Mr. President, your reaction to the story in The Atlantic that said that some of your top cabinet officials and aides had been discussing very sensitive material through Signal and included an Atlantic reporter for that. What is your response to that?
I don't know anything about it. I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic. To me, it's a magazine that's going out of business. I think it's not much of a magazine, but I know nothing about it. You're saying that they had what?
They were using Signal to coordinate on sensitive materials and
having to do with what? Having to do with what? What were they talking about?
With the Houthis.
The Houthis? You mean the attack on the Houthis? Right. Well, it couldn't have been very effective, because the attack was very effective. I can tell you that. I don't know anything about it. You're telling me about it for the first time.
For the first time. Oh, my God. Word for word, what he said about the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That might have been sincere, but he does this all the time now. When he doesn't want to answer a question, he says, I don't know anything about it. Just if you track it, he does it every time now.
Mr. President, are you worried that you don't know anything about this? I mean, honestly, like this right.
Shouldn't you be across this?
You did not know this? How is it that, because it's not like Goldberg just wrote the article without telling the administration that they were writing the article.
No, he left the chat.
So the question is, we left the chat.
They would have been notified about it.
They didn't notice it. They did not notice it. Oh, my God. And so the only time that they knew that Goldberg had been in the chat was when he went to the DNI and said, can you confirm that this was an actual confirmation, was an actual threat? So here's the thing. Here's the next question for Donald Trump. Why weren't you informed about this major leak? Whose job is it in the administration to keep you informed? It's not enough to accept he didn't know. Okay, if he didn't know, are you upset that you didn't know about this? Who is entrusted? Whose responsibility is this? If he says no, I'm not concerned. There are professionals handling. Which ones? Who are the professionals that handle it? The one that let the reporter from this horrible magazine into the chat? Like this, the press should not let this go. Well, every single journalist now, of course.
Politico is reporting that Signal's not allowed to be downloaded on federal devices, so it looks like that they were likely using their personal cell phones.
Which is also in violation of the Presidential Records Act and all sorts of. You're not supposed to use your private devices to discuss government business.
Unless they changed it, to make it so that Signal would be allowed to be downloaded on federal devices, but I doubt that, right? I mean, again, this is all about avoiding the Presidential Records Act. And like Donald Trump did this with the documents that he hoarded in his bathroom down in Mar-a-Lago. Like he is aggressively trying to conceal the evidence of his actions from the public repeatedly. That's what the whole reason behind this is. And this, like, the Epstein files, good example of that. He was saying how he was going to release them in the most transparent administration in history, and it's just a head fake.
Here is Tulsi Gabbard, also on that call. And she is just coincidentally meeting with the Senate Intelligence Committee today because they were trying to find out how big of an idiots the top members of the Senate of the government's intel community is. Here is her response.
Contact the defense secretary or others after this specific military planning was put out and say, hey, we should be doing this in a skiff?
There was no classified material that was shared in that.
So then if there's no
check.
classified material, share it with the committee. You can't have it both ways. These are important jobs. This is our national security. Bobbing and weaving and trying to, filibuster your answer. So please answer the question.
I mean, yeah, we only have short clips because it's still happening.
But wait, but understand what's going on here.
Yeah.
She's not talking about what was on the rest of that conversation. And then she's saying there was no classified information there. Well, if there was no classified information there, Jeffrey Goldberg should be dumping the entire thing onto the Atlantic.com website right now. Right now, there's absolutely no excuse for him not to do that. People should be going to Jeffrey Goldberg and saying, why are you withholding this information that the head of the DNI has just said is not classified?
Yep. But we know that just by definition, the fact that there was a CIA officer on the chat whose name Goldberg did not want to release, that would indicate that that was pretty classified.
Well, and here's the other thing. The idea that knowledge of an attack, an imminent attack on another country is not classified, well, then why weren't they going to reporters 2 hours beforehand and saying, hey, just want to give you a heads up. We're about to bomb Yemen. This is it's obviously a joke. But every time they lie, and all they're doing is lying, every time they lie, it raises another question that should be asked. Let's put up Holly. Here's Holly. Now, here's the thing. They are going to go, and all of these Republican senators, they're going to avoid going into any situation where they may be asked a real question about this because they are afraid of this. Make no mistake about it. Josh Hawley doesn't run to Laura Ingram's show unless he wants to make sure that he gets the first word out about it so that next time he gets asked, I already addressed this.
Right.
Senator Hawley, I'll just read part of this piece in The Atlantic. The world found out shortly before 2 p.m.
Pause it for 1 second.
March
Just pause
15th.
it. Keep it up there. Let me tell you what's going on in Holly's mind right now. Keep the smile. Don't move the face. Keep the smile. Don't move the face. Keep the smile. Don't move the face. Show absolutely no reaction. Go ahead.
Before 2 p.m. Eastern on March 15th, that the U.S. was bombing Houthi targets across Yemen. And this reporter, Jeffrey Goldberg, writes that I, however, knew 2 hours before the first bombs exploded that the attack might be coming. The reason I knew this is that, again, this is the article in The Atlantic, that Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, had texted me the war plan at 11:44 a.m. The plan included precise information about weapons packages, targets, and timing. Senator, your reaction to this?
Well, I thought what the Secretary of Defense just said, Laura, was an outstanding statement. And listen, I mean, we don't know how much of this is accurate or not, but it looks like even if everything the Atlantic reported is true, it's the president's advisors discussing among themselves options they might recommend to the president. And no,
pause it. This is not options they might recommend to the president. It's quite clear that Stephen Miller says it's green light. Here's the plan. Go do it. If anything, they're discussing their queasiness about what the president has ordered.
Yeah. And how to translate it into reality.
How are we going to deal with the fallout of this? Go ahead.
Options they might recommend to the president. And nobody can deny the success of what the president is doing here, which is what Pete Hegseth just underscored. And this is what the leftist media is reduced to. They can't argue with the policies which the American people support. They can't argue with this new demonstration of American strength that is keeping Americans safe at home and abroad. And so now we're griping about who's on a text message and who's not. I mean, come on.
Who's go back again just to hear that the way he's dismissing this. Who's on a text message or not? Can we all get on this next signal chat?
This is what the leftist media is reduced to. They can't argue with the policies which the American people support. They can't argue with this new demonstration of American strength that is keeping Americans safe at home and abroad. And so now we're griping about who's on a text message and who's not. I mean, come on.
Griping about who's on a text message or not.
What's the policy that he's referring to that the American people are on board for? Yemen?
Yemen.
Oh, that's interesting. Then Donald Trump shouldn't have run as the guy that was going to end the war in Ukraine on his first day, and that he was going to bring peace through strength. Is killing dozens of civilians in Yemen and assaulting their capital peace?
Here is.
So was he referring to the statement by Hegseth on the tarmac when he said he made a wonderful statement? Because
let's look at that.
Let's look at that, because Hegseth says this after it was already confirmed by the national security spokesperson Brian Hughes. I guess as another indication of the incompetence of this administration, the word didn't get back to the defense secretary that the White House has already confirmed the veracity of the text chain, and he says this to reporters.
Can you share how your information about war plans against the Houthis in Yemen was shared with a journalist in The Atlantic, and were those details classified?
You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again, to include the hoaxes of Russia, or the fine people on both sides hoax, or suckers and losers hoax. So this is the guy that peddles in garbage. This is what he does. I would love to comment on the Houthi campaign because of the skill and courage of our troops. I've monitored it very closely from the beginning. And you see, we've been managing 4 years of deferred maintenance under the Trump administration. Our troops, our sailors were getting shot at as targets. Our ships couldn't sail through. And when they did shoot back, it was purely defensively or at shacks in Yemen. President Trump said, no more. We will reestablish deterrence. We will open freedom of navigation, and we will ultimately decimate the Houthis, which is exactly what we're doing as we speak from the beginning, overwhelmingly.
Why were those details shared on Signal, and how did you learn that a journalist was privy to the targets, the types of weapons used?
I've heard I was characterized. Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that. Thank you. I appreciate it.
The NSC said it was authentic.
Right. So she says the White House says it was authentic. Okay. Nobody was texting war plans.
We were signaling them.
What? Yeah. Right. It's not a text.
It's not a tweet anymore. It's a post.
I mean, he's not lying when he breaks the fourth wall and looks directly at the camera. Nobody was texting war plans.
The best part is, like, every horrible thing you could say about Jeffrey Goldberg, that in many instances I might agree with, makes it even weirder that you would have included him in this conversation.
Yeah.
We've decided to take the most loathsome reporter in the country and secretly have them monitor everything we say on this Signal channel.
It's a good point, because if Waltz invited him, that means that Goldberg's in his contacts.
Oh, yes, but
my
Goldberg
point
said that they didn't know each other. They had never talked before.
Okay.
But it's not uncommon, I would imagine.
But it makes the
like
foul worse that you accidentally included a guy who is completely, to your characterization,
let's be clear here. If you think that this guy, this reporter, is the scum of the earth, the worst, most lying, horrible person in the world, and you let him into the Signal chat, who are you also inadvertently letting into the Signal chat? Like, if the worst of the worst, this is not like, okay, we accidentally let Charlie Kirk in. Whatever. We can trust Kirk. He's a great man and he did the right thing, or whatever it is. But for all we know, for all we know, one of these guys is just going like, this week it's Laura Loomer. I mean,
Milo.
Why would anyone, based upon the fact that they had zero protocols to prevent this, They had zero protocols and seemingly were not even aware that it had happened. Why in the world would anyone believe this is the only time it's happened? I mean, come on here.
I mean, this means that they have just told the world that they are doing government business on their phones, even if it's through a commercial encrypted app. That basically is open season for any government official under the Trump administration for a foreign government to hack their information.
But don't you think that they're not going to use their private phones anymore? I would imagine they've really learned a lesson here, and they're probably not going to use their phones.
I mean, private phones, it's like they're individual private servers.
Like Jesse Waters.
And let's cap this off with Jesse Waters trying to explain. I mean, they're worried about this. And frankly, anything that takes a minute or more of their brain power in which to deal with is a positive at this point. Like anything you can find that in any way breaks their stride, slows them down, makes them confused, causes dissent, causes recriminations, is healthy for across the board.
Yeah.
Did you ever try to start a group text? You're adding people and you accidentally add the wrong person. All of a sudden, your Aunt Mary knows all your raunchy plans for the bachelor party. Well, that kind of happened today with the Trump administration.
Specific.
Mike Waltz was putting together a group chat.
Hold on, let me just help Jesse Waters here. You ever illicitly start a group text where it is illegal for you to actually have this group text on the app that you're using, and you're instead of talking about your bachelor party, which is raunchy, I guess, you're talking about imminent plans to attack another country,
like aircraft carrier movements,
which in other
Target
context is
names.
In just about every other one, everyone would consider to be highly sensitive material. And then you let your Aunt Mary in. Go ahead.
With the Secretary of Defense, the VP, and a bunch of other national security officials to collaborate on whether to strike Iranian proxies in Yemen who keep firing missiles and shutting down shipping. Well, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz accidentally added a reporter to the group text.
Whoopsie.
And not a good reporter.
Oh.
Jeffrey Goldberg from The Atlantic, one of the biggest hoax artists around.
Can you pause it
Heard
just
some
really
things
quick?
you
Just
probably-
not a good reporter, smash cut to a still of him next to Nancy Pelosi in case the geriatric Fox audience needed a visual cue to dismiss the story
does
altogether.
Not a good reporter mean? Oh, Pelosi.
Blech.
Yeah, the people that watch Fox love their good reporters.
Right.
Jeffrey Goldberg from The Atlantic, one of the biggest hoax artists around.
Hoax artist?
Well, he heard some things he probably shouldn't have, but could have been a wee bit of a security breach. But it's not like they homebrewed a server and then bleached it or kept classified documents in their garages next to their Corvette. I'm sure it won't happen again.
What? Trump?
Wow.
So, just to recap, Trump took classified documents, kept them in the bathroom at Mar-a-Lago. When it was found out, the feds were like, hey, can you return those? He refused, returned them partially. They said you didn't return all of them. And that was what prompted one of the 4 criminal probes into Donald Trump that he was undergoing over the past 4 years. The Biden...
Iconic photo.
Yeah, there we go, right by the toilet. Biden had classified documents. That prompted them to look into Biden and Mike Pence. Both Pence, this is bipartisan, and Biden were like, oh, shoot, we did have some files laying around. We'll voluntarily return them. And they're just using that example and not the first one, which kicked off all of that probe into the past officials having classified documents. It's so disingenuous. I can't even believe he can sit up there and make that case.
I can explain it to you.
Money?
No. You get a tax cut if you are a government agency and you hire a black person. That is, you get tax cuts
Case
if you're
closed.
a government agency. That is what's going on here.
Yeah.
It's just like they
Easiest crowd ever.
They just lie to their audience. They lie to their audience, and they do it very, very effectively because, you know, their audience, Oh, well, I listened to Jerry, Waters, whatever his name is. Jesse Waters. And he just said it was a wee bit of a security breach.
A wee bit?
Wee bit of a security breach. Can we go back to that?
Yeah.
That's good. You got to pull that. Will you please, that quote? It's a wee bit of a security breach. Okay. I mean, it's like, but is it anything compared to bleach, putting bleach on your server? This was literally not a hypothetical breach. It was a breach.
A full-on
breach.
Elaborate on whether to strike Iranian proxies in Yemen who keep firing missiles and shutting down shipping. Well, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz accidentally added a reporter to the group text, and not a good reporter. Jeffrey Goldberg from The Atlantic, one of the biggest hoax artists around. Well, he heard some things he probably shouldn't have, but could have been a wee bit of a security breach.
That's got to be a pull.
A drop, yeah.
Oh, my God.
A wee bit. Wasn't he,
It's funny because I may have committed some light treason.
Yeah.
Their main sort of attack is the press is nasty, but that contradicts their sort of emphasis here. It'd be much better to downplay how much they disagree with Goldberg.
100%. It's like not only did we leak this information, we leaked it to the worst of the worst. But the idea is, but here's, that's the way our rational brains work. But the way that it hits the Fox viewer is we can't trust anything Goldberg's saying anyways. So if anything looks bad, if they happen to go over and actually read the source material, which of course they won't, they're like, oh, you can't trust him anyways. He's probably lying about half of it. He's probably making this up.
Multiple people have called him a hoaxer. I don't know Goldberg's background enough to know that he hoaxed anything. Did he do anything during the Iraq War?
To be honest with you, I have no idea.
But he's the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, which is a paper that regularly publishes very flattering stories for national security purposes. That's probably why Waltz got his digits in the first place, as a plan to leak to him in the future.
Right, and just fat-fingered it.
Yep.
Whoopsie.
Let's
know. Do you have a audio clip of Goldberg that we're gonna?
Yeah, here he is on MSNBC last night with Jen Psaki just explaining how this went down.
Strike against the Houthis, right? I'm reading this and I'm like, they're really talking about a strike against the Houthis. Ratcliffe names, other people name other people who are publicly named public figures. Ratcliffe names a person. I'm not going to say the name. The whole real name of this person.
Say the name. Say the name. Pause it. Say the name. We've been told by the director of national intelligence none of this stuff was classified. Say it all. Yeah. Dump it all. All of it. He should take every single photo he took of that text exchange, and it should be on the Atlantic website within minutes right now, because Tulsi Gabbard has said none of it's classified.
But he's not going to do that because, well, I know that you know that, but it's the same reason he didn't have the stomach to stay in the group chat this is...
None of it's classified. We should have done it. It was just literally... Listen, it's like a bachelor party. It's like a bachelor party. You can find out like where everybody's hanging out. Maybe you crash.
About your raunchy
like,
details.
Oh my gosh, we're gonna be. I'm gonna go meet them at Benihana. They're all going to Benihana before they go to the dance club. Before they go to the strip club, I'm gonna go to Benihana. I'm gonna hook up at Benihana, and we're all gonna. Is that where people go on their bachelor parties?
I mean, my guess is that the guy that slashes future wife's tires probably has a little bit more raunch in mind.
Well, you start at Benihana. You gotta eat. You gotta eat.
Mm-hmm. The whole real name of this person, who is going to be his liaison, in the course of my reporting and trying to understand, I came to understand that this is an active CIA officer. His name has never been in public before, who is
everyone on the chain may not have had need to know who this person
Well, yeah, was. Because remember, the chain is pretty big. The chain is not just 5 intelligence officials or 4 defense officials. It's defense, intelligence, treasury. It's the chief of staff of the White House. It's people who certainly don't need to know the names. I mean, as you know from the classified world, from the secret world, the less you know, the better, right? The less you have to go to sleep with at night, the better off you are in many ways. You can't get into trouble from not knowing something that you shouldn't know. And so I have to say, somewhat astonished that he would put this official's name into what is essentially an open channel. Forget the fact that he, like everyone else, had no idea that they were sharing that information with the editor-in-chief of the Atlantic magazine in the same chain, because nobody had asked during the course of this, who is this JG? You know, my initial showed up as JG.
And you don't know who that, do you know who that is at this point?
I have no idea. I have no idea who, in other words, who Mike Waltz was looking for? I don't know. He didn't answer that question for me.
The thing about signal chats is you have to invite people. You have to list the names to create a group. So there was a conscious just adding of you to this group.
Yes.
There's been a lot of effort to respond. I mean, I noted as I just kind of gave the summary of the piece, you got a response from the National Security Council spokesperson. No.
Oh yeah, and every agency has been saying, just ask the National Security
Council. Just ask
Council.
them, punting it to them.
Well, what's going on you could read the tea leaves here. It's Mike Waltz put this group together, not me. Don't ask me, ask him. That's what's going on.
But every one of those individuals should have known that they shouldn't be having these conversations.
Look, we all like to think that we're really good at digital hygiene, but most of us are not good at digital hygiene. And if there's a lesson here, a lesson for a normal person living in the world, it's know who you're texting with.
I don't think actually that's the lesson. I think that's actually like the day 12 interview that you do about this scandal before that becomes a lesson. I don't think it's a lesson for everybody who's texting to know who's on the text chain, because everybody does that. I think the lesson here is they're using private apps in controversy of U.S. federal law. They are destroying government information in controversy to federal law. They are completely incompetent at what they're doing. This is the top intelligence people in the country. They are not using any protocols. There is no cohesive policy in the administration. There's a lot of lessons here, but I would put somewhere around well into the 40s of the lessons you could learn to hey, for you folks out there who are on, chat threads, make sure that, if you got a surprise party for somebody, you're not including the person whose surprise party it is.
What else are they hiding? That is the question. What other agencies are using Signal? What else are they trying to hide from government oversight?
And how exposed are they to any sort of intelligence service from another country?
Maybe a wee bit.
If this is how they're doing it, I imagine it's a little bit easier.
All right. We didn't get to 80% of what we were hoping to today, but that was a lot to talk about.
We did a lengthy breakdown. That was a big story.
Folks, on the other side, we're going to talk about Social Security because it's they're coming after it. It's a big deal, and there are already reports all around the country, from long lines, phone lines that are down. Their project has been to drive a wedge between people and Social Security, and they are doing it. And the important thing, to the extent that we can push back on this, the important thing is to get the word out that this is a purposeful effort by the Trump administration to destroy the Social Security Administration so that the relationship between people and Social Security in this country worsens or sours, because it is the most beloved program that we have. And it is incredibly effective. But they want to make its delivery problematic so that people start getting frustrated with it. And so far, they're having a lot of success for being in administration for less than 2.5 months. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.